called Bitter Winter, which covers daily religious liberty internationally. We are mostly well known for our coverage of religious liberty violations in mainland China, and so we do appreciate the democratic role of Taiwan. As a matter of fact, we love Taiwan and what it stands for, and that's the very reason we are also concerned when religious liberty issues arise in Taiwan, which may in a way compromise the good image of this country we appreciate so much. But we will return to the Taijimen case later, and we, without further ado, will start this event with a video which will introduce us to the Taijimen case.
The auction process has been legally concluded.
A look in your eyes, a prosecutor can decide whether to prosecute you or not. Then there will be no peace in Taiwan.
Where the indictment is unacceptable. If the tax authority uses this indictment as the basis for taxation, I think it is questionable.
The code doesn't count. The code doesn't count.
It has been confirmed that the money involved is a gift rather than income. So there is no issue of income tax.
You can go to the website of the Control Yuan to see that I have issued 7 corrections. For each correction, the NTB said, we...
Control Yuan decided that Thai system can be taken to solve the case.
The administrative agencies exercise administrative discretion. They have to ensure that people's human rights on taxation are protected.
The whole judicial system has proved Taijimen innocent. There's no way the investigation by the tax agencies is clearer than that by the judicial department.
Has wasted too much time and resource. This is very serious, and it has shaken the 5 branches of government and the foundation of the nation.
Calling on the Taxation Bureau to revoke its illegal tax bills. You just ignore them. Hey, you think you're above us? You ignore courts, the Control Yuan, and even the Legislative Yuan. You really think you're the boss?
We request that the Ministry of Finance conclude this case in 2 months.
Gifts in nature. The others all say gifts too. Let the NTB of the Central Area submit the report to the Ministry of Finance. Okay, we'll do as the Deputy Minister says. Revoke it? Okay, area will report to the Ministry of Finance.
Between 1966 and 1990, Taijimen had no tax problems. From 1997 to this day, Taijimen has had no tax problems either. Why did you impose taxes on Taijimen only for 1991 to 1996?
Thousands of people surround the auction site in Miaoli. The people still sat and wait to defend the land. The Taijimen case, in which over 10,000 people have been victimized, has lasted for 24 years. but the enforcement agency still wanted to auction the land of Tai Jimen to pay back a wrong tax bill when Tai Jimen was found not guilty of tax evasion by the court 13 years ago.
Since it is a problematic judgment, the enforcement agency should not have executed it. So why did they execute it? Why? It's a question of bonuses. When the Tai Jimen case was handled like this, will ordinary people encounter the same problem? Definitely.
你怎么算的？他哪有看？这从哪里来的？你是不是？说这样不能算吧？他说啊，这个不才，你要怎么样？他说我们是上任，人家要想了，这就是要做嘛。他这意思就是反正就是这样办啊。人家没有压力。 我没办法，我就这样干。他说：“哎，那不才怪我。”你是说他找你去只是做做样子而已？就是你不管说什么，反正他写他的。他吓死了。他吓死？他就是老跟他讲，这个说他当时讲，这个他知道是，我说他。
Search was conducted on December 19, 1996. He said that there was tax evasion. The income tax in 1996 cannot be audited until April 1997. They had not yet filed their taxes. How could you investigate tax evasion? How do you know how they will file their tax return? Therefore, the tax years involved in the case clearly showed that this violated the tax law. During the search on December 19, 1996, two bank statements show the balance of $22,000. However, the next day, a newspaper published that the master of Tai Jimen had $110 million income from fraudulent acts and cram school tuition. You can't make such an inference even when you are writing a novel. The so-called evidence obtained after the search can be proved to be false, because you already said the amount. The transcripts and testimony. When were they done? Definitely after December 20th. Could I know how much tax you have evaded the minute I am assigned to the case when auditing taxes? It's more than illegal taxation. It's the so-called framing. $22,000 was blown up against the principle that taxes should be imposed according to the law.
Gil Wang is a Tai Jimen Dizzy, meaning disciple, and she will further introduce us into the Tai Jimen case.
Thank you, Professor Massimo. Hi, everyone. Today, we are very grateful for the opportunity to present to you one of Taiwan's longest standing cases of religious persecution and unjust detention. We have persisted for 25 years, and we will continue this fight until justice and hope are restored, not only for Tai Jimen, but also for Taiwan. Throughout these years, while we have worked on this case, Dr. Hong, our Shifu, has continued to guide us in the journey to spread love and peace around the world. And today, his efforts are widely recognized internationally, as we can see here in this first picture, where we performed in front of the US Capitol in the year of 2000. Next slide, please. So Dr. Hong has provided a home for us where, regardless of our occupation, age, gender, etc., we can cultivate physical, spiritual, and mental health. And in Amenpai, the relationship between Shifu and Dizi is very cherished, where Shifu not only teaches us wisdom, but also treats us like his children. And next slide, please. As we talk about this case, it is important to note that Taiwan was under martial law for 38 years. And during this time, Taiwan had a policy of targeting spiritual and independent religious movements. And during that time, even after the martial law period ended in 1987, there was a period of transition where they still targeted spiritual groups and persecuted them for not supporting the then government. And one such religious purge happened in 1996 after the first direct presidential election. For political reasons, the then Taiwanese government targeted spiritual and religious movements suspected to be hostile to the president in power. Unfortunately, Taijimen was caught in this crossfire, although it had not taken any political stance. Several groups, as you can see on the right, were also targeted, and the Taiwan government used tax measures and criminal measures to suppress these groups. Many of these groups gave in, and others left their homeland. Taijimen, however, chose to persist to reveal the truth and seek justice. So now for the background and history of the case itself. In 1996, at the time, the prosecutor investigating the Taijimen case, as we all saw in the video, significantly violated due process by falsely accusing people and arresting them without proper investigation, and also fabricated false evidence to completely eliminate Taijimen. Dr. Hong, his wife, and several members were illegally arrested and charged with fraud without real evidence. And when the media asked the prosecutor Ho why he suspected Taijimen of raising goblins, he simply stated, "I saw a streak of shadow in his eyes, and based on my experience, I suspected so." So that just sounds completely ridiculous, and it goes to show that the Taijimen case started from such unlawful means. And just a few months ago, a shocking video was released where tax collector Shi Yueshen revealed that he was pressured by prosecutor Hou Kuanren to give false testimony against Taijimen. After the arrest, the NTB furthered the persecution and imposed tax bills on Taijimen for the years 1991 to 1996, based solely on this false indictment. The NTB didn't conduct any investigation before imposing these taxes, and the false testimony of tax collector Shi Yueshen was the main evidence used to issue these tax bills. The prosecutor and tax officers abused their power and ruined the reputation of Taijimen and tens of thousands of innocent people. In 2007, after a long battle, Taiwan Supreme Court ruled that Taijimen, Dr. Hong, and his co-defendants were not guilty of tax evasion or any other charges, and they did not owe any tax. They even received national compensation for unjust detention. But NTB disregarded the Supreme Court decision completely and continued to levy taxes on Taijimen. And another significant event to highlight is the public hearing that took place at the Legislative Yuan on June 17th of 2010. During the public hearing, NTB's evidence hearing behaviors were revealed. As a result, Taiwan's Ministry of Finance publicly and openly promised to resolve the case within 2 months. However, that did not happen, and the government failed to keep its promise to its own citizens and continued to levy taxes. Eventually, in 2019 to 2020, the NTB corrected the taxes to zero for 5 years, except for the year 1992, despite the fact that all the underlying principles for all the years were the same. Based on this unjustified tax bill, Taijimen's sacred land for self-cultivation was illegally auctioned off and confiscated in August of 2020. And Taijimen is a member of several martial arts and Taoist organizations, and the Taijimen case was taken notice during the first review of Taiwan's implementation of the ICCPR and ICESCR conducted by the International Review Committee in 2013. In fact, no master of other martial arts organizations or spiritual movements have been taxed for accepting red envelopes from their disciples because red envelopes are a gift, not tuition. So this is a violation of the principle of equality because they treat Taijimen differently from these other martial arts groups. Furthermore, Taiwanese law states that criminal decisions should take precedence over administrative court decisions, seen, for example, in Taiwan's former president Chen Shui-bian's corruption case. But in Taijimen's case, NTB did not wait for the court decision. Instead, it decided on its own effort to tax Taijimen. Once again, they treat Taijimen differently, and this is clearly discrimination using taxation as a means to persecute groups they do not like. So the basic principle of religious freedom is freedom of thought and conscience. So whether you're religious or non-religious, every individual should have the right to embrace these values. And as the former United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback stated, government's role is to protect that innate right of a person to select their own course of future for their soul. And here at Taijimen, we're an ancient Menpai, Qigong Menpai, that promotes love, peace, and conscience. And rogue bureaucrats in Taiwan are clearly making a grave mistake in abusing their power. So it is precisely because we love Taiwan that we call for a solution to a problem involving these handful of rogue bureaucrats that have given Taiwan a bad reputation both domestically and internationally. And we hope that the government rectifies this error, the unjust case that happened under authoritarianism. In this manner, Taiwan can become a true democratic country. And we firmly believe that, we firmly believe that the system in the United States, Taiwan's most important ally, can put a full stop to this.
Thank you, Gil. Gil has already explained the Taijimen case, but to the risk of repeating more of the same, I want to explain it from the point of view of an outside observer who is not from Taiwan and not a member at DZ of Taijimen. So for those who are not Taiwanese, we all love and respect Taiwan as a country protecting religious liberty, but that was not always the case. There was no religious liberty under the martial law, and there was no a lot of religious liberty in the post-authoritarian phase. After the martial law had been abrogated, but basically a single party, the Kuomintang, still controlled pretty much everything. And all the habits of cracking down on religious and spiritual groups perceived as not supporting the party in charge persisted. In 1996, Taiwan had its first free presidential elections, but the ruling party resented very much having serious opponents. One of these opponents was a disciple of one of the largest Buddhist orders, Foguanshan, and that determined a crackdown where the master of Foguanshan was arrested, but it extended to many religious and spiritual groups which were perceived rightly, or in the case of Taijimen, wrongly, as not supporting the presidential candidate of the Kuomintang. So as we heard, the master of Taijimen, Dr. Hong, and other members were arrested and accused of fraud and tax evasion. Eventually, they won a total victory in criminal courts up to the Supreme Court. They were found not guilty and even received monetary compensation for the unjust detention. But what happened is the tax case maintained a life of its own and kept going on, notwithstanding the Supreme Court in the criminal case as clearly stated there was no tax evasion whatsoever. So tax bills continue to be issued for the alleged tax evasion. More than 20 years of legal battles continued until the National Taxation Bureau, the NTB, accepted to correct to zero all the tax bills except one, 1992, claiming for 1992, which had been the object of a separate case, the statute of limitation had expired. So notwithstanding the fact that nothing different happened in 92 with respect to the other years, they say, sorry, Taijimen has to pay because the statute of limitation had expired. Now, Taijimen did not pay, and unlike many other situations, did not settle. Why they didn't settle? It's not a question of money. In 25 years, they spent more money in lawyers only that the cost of the settlement would have costed them. But that's because Taiji Men and Dr. Hong, they toured the world teaching people how to be good citizens. So they cannot admit that they themselves are bad citizens who tried to evade taxes causes they didn't. And so for a reason of principle, they keep this fight. And as we saw in the video and we heard in 2020, the National Taxation Office says, oh, you didn't pay the 92 bill, we seize your property. And they had provisionally taken other properties that they gave back, unfortunately, in a destituted state, because for 20 years they didn't take care of them, but they seized the one property. That was a land that Taiji Men regard as sacred, intended for building a spiritual center, tried to auction it off, didn't work, and they seized, generating the most massive religious liberty protests in history in Taiwan, with more than 10,000 people in the street. Protests were stopped for COVID, but they are continuing now. So in conclusion, some of you may believe this is a very technical tax case in Taiwan, but it isn't. It's a question of religious liberty, which was grossly violated, and that's the result of this violation. There is no technical solution because the Taiwan authorities continue to stick to the technicality of the statute of limitation. There is only a possible political solution. As a friend of Taiwan, I believe this solution is in the best interest of Taiwan and its image, particularly in this political moment. And as somebody who has worked in religious liberty field for 40 years, I believe that the only country which can broker a political solution in Taiwan is the United States. And that's why this event is not held, say, in Brussels or in Rome, but it's held in Washington, D.C. And speaking of Brussels, we have connected via Zoom today Mr. Willy Fautré, who is the co-founder and director of a very important NGO active in the field of human rights and religious liberty called Human Rights Without Frontiers. And Mr. Willy Fautré has also followed for years with great attention the Taiji Men case. And let me emphasize, his organization is also a great friend of Taiwan. So nobody's here today to attack or criticize Taiwan or put them in trouble. So we will now hear from Willy Fautré, who will supplement some additional comments on the Taiji Men case via Zoom.
Hey, thank you very much, Massimo, for giving me the floor. And I'm really sorry not to be able to be present physically with you in Washington, but thanks to Zoom now, we can find alternative solutions. The link between corruption and human rights is more complex than one might think. First, there is no universally agreed definition of corruption, nor does the United Nations feature one. According to a definition that is often quoted by the EU institutions and civil society, corruption is, and it's important to stress it, corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. Second, neither international human rights treaties nor the Convention against corruption explicitly define corruption as a violation of human rights. Yet, interpretation of these legally binding texts, as well as other guiding international documents, increasingly link corruption to human rights. Coming back to the definition of corruption, as I said, largely used in the EU and by civil society, corruption is abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It is obvious that in Taiwan, there are abuses by the administrative power for private gain, because there is a systemic conflict of interests which opens the door to corruption. What is at stake here is the system of bonuses, which viciously leads to the overcollection of taxes and even the fabrication of tax evasion cases, as it was the case with Taijimen. This is an abuse of power for private financial gain. Indeed, if the tax income collected for this year does not meet the expected amount, the staff member's performance score will be low and he or she will not receive a tax collection bonus. As a result, individuals in high positions will encourage their employees to collect more taxes in order to improve their performance score and be eligible for a promotion. The objective is purely financial benefit, private gain, as it is mentioned in the definition. The beneficiaries of this rotten system are the Ministry of Finance, the National Tax Bureau, and the Enforcement Agency. However, this bonus system, which is a product of the martial law era, has no legal basis, but a fund is budgeted every year for this system. Businesses are often coerced by tax officers to pay some unjustified taxes. And some tax officers would even conduct malicious tax audits for the sake of bonuses. Many people don't owe any tax, but the law enforcement agency would forcibly auction their property. Moreover, issuing a so-called wrong tax bill is not punishable. Former Control Yuan member Qianling Wingjun once said in our webinar, and I quote him, "The bonus system should have been abolished long ago because bonuses provide an incentive to be greedy. Public servants are paid by the public money. They must work properly according to their conscience," unquote. In 2009, the case of Taijimen, for example, was listed by the Control Yuan in 2005 as one of the major human rights protection cases in the general report and the work of human rights protection of the Control Yuan. The text of Taijimen shows that the system of tax bonuses granted to public servants can lead to undue fiscal and judicial harassment for years and even decades. It also proves that this system is a form of organized corruption inside the state itself and an abuse of power of their leaders and their staff for personal financial benefits. In conclusion, our NGO, Human Rights Without Frontiers, here in Brussels, recommends a reform in the Taiwanese judicial system, especially the administrative litigation system. Second, the annulment of the bonus system, as it creates incentives and conflicts of interest that can lead to undue fiscal and judicial harassment in total impunity. And finally, sanctions against those in state administrations and the judiciary who are found to be negligent or to have abused their power. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Willie. And now we will have a video testimony from Taijimen Dizi.
To me, the sky was gray night.
I saw policemen at the door. They were fully armed.
The next day, I started to hear other brothers and sisters' houses being searched by police.
To me, it has been a nightmare for years.
Shifu turned his head and looked at me. Our eyes met, and I burst into tears.
He claimed that we are an evil group. I feel I'm here to confront an evil government agency.
Taipei District Prosecutor's Office issued 7 search warrants today in Taipei.
On December 19, 1996, based on a letter with a false accusation of fraud, Huanzhen District led hundreds of armed police officers to search the 12 chapters of the Taijimen Qigong Academy, as well as some Taijimen Dizi's houses, a large-scale search.
We are not criminals. Why was it necessary to have armed policemen with guns loaded rushing into the Taijimen Academy?
The policeman came in without speaking or showing any credentials, then immediately ransacked my house.
I just put down my bag at the academy when the policeman said he had to search my bag.
My house was also searched on the 24th. On the same day after the search, I was taken into custody. And I was detained for 4 months. I was detained and held incommunicado. All the questions were designed to frame Taijimen Shifu. You needed to give the answers they wanted. If you don't obey, they torture you with emotional abuse. Then the prosecutor asked, "Is your Shifu's Kung Fu real?" I replied, "Yes." Then he was doing like this, pounding the table hard, loudly, and angrily. He said, "You have no compassion. What are you practicing? What are you cultivating? You have absolutely no compassion. Your family is going to be, your wife is going to be in prison, and you don't even want to rescue her."
Another Taijimen Dizi, Peng Lijian, who had a 7-month-old baby, was named by the prosecutor Ho as confidential secretary, a non-existing title in Taijimen. Her house was also searched. When she was taken away, her family was not even notified.
He knew I had a little one. He had also said, "I checked your background, I know you're innocent." And yet he still took me to the conference room and wrote a false statement. I told him, "No, that is not what I said."
He didn't have the authority to ask me to go with him. At the time, we didn't know we had the right to reject him, but I did ask him, "Do I have to go with you?" He replied, "If you don't go, I will arrest more of your fellow brothers and sisters." That made me feel that I would better go.
I didn't commit crimes. Why are you taking me to the investigation station? He said, "You practiced long enough. If you don't come, I will just take a few more brothers and sisters downstairs later."
I will never forget the phone call with my mom at the moment. She said she doesn't know what time she will return home.
My dad and mom called us 3 over to their room. They took out their bank book and some documents and told us where to get money for daily expenses. Then they told us they already found a lawyer, telling us to not worry.
Because Shifu and Shirmu are not home, we need to be very brave. We go to the academy every day. At that time, we didn't dare to wear the uniform. We would bring it instead of wearing it.
Prosecutor Quanran Ho spread fake news in the media every day. It's terrible. I was scared to speak over the phone, whether it's fixed line in the house or company lines. I don't know if I am being taped.
I also prepared a bag in my home, ready at any time, in case anything happens.
in case I get taken. It was Christmas Day, December 24th, when I walked out of the door of the investigation bureau. I felt really lost. On Christmas Day, my family didn't know where I went, and I didn't know if I would come back. It's Christmas. But that Christmas is really a black Christmas. We must maintain this home, make it bright. No one can turn off the lights of our home.
Thank you. And now we will have an in-person witness testimony from Miss Brenda Chen.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Brenda Chen. To stay away from the nightmare caused by prosecutor Ho Kwan-ren, I have moved to the United States for 18 years. In 1996, without any investigation or evidence, prosecutor Ho used the media to create a false image that Taijimen was an evil religious group that defrauded people. Because of smear campaign, my dad's career and reputation were ruined, causing us great emotional and financial loss. On Christmas Eve in 1996, there was no peace in my family. Even though no one accused my dad of any crime, he was detained and held incommunicado for 4 months by the prosecutor. Our house was searched. We were scared and didn't know when my dad could come home. By means of hunger, fatigue, and threat, the prosecutor just wanted my dad to testify against my Shifu. He threatened that my mom would be taken too, and that nobody would take care of my sister and me. He was trying to force my dad to make false testimony. My dad listened to his conscience and told the truth. The prosecutor was very angry and extended my dad's detention by 2 months without any justified reason. While my dad was detained, my dad's brothers blamed my mom. My sister even received a threatening note at school. Before retirement, my dad was the chief financial officer of a famous company with outstanding credit. However, because of prosecutors' illegal investigation, his credit was totally ruined. 2 or 3 days after he was released on bail, the bank withdrew our mortgage. It was impossible for my parents to make ends meet. Only on my month's salary, my dad had to ask our relatives for help. However, because of negative news reporting about Taijimen, they were not willing to help us and even laughed at my dad. At the end, my dad had to sell the house. Afterwards, because of negative and false press reports, my mom, who worked in the Ministry of Justice, was under a lot of pressure and was also forced to retire early. My sister and I went abroad to live a heartbreaking place. She went to France and I came to the United States. Years later, my dad received national compensation for unlawful imprisonment, but nothing could ever compensate for our pain and suffering from this incident. 7 years ago, my dad passed away. With regret, unable to see the redress of the Taijimen case. Although my family members now live in different parts of the world, we are united in heart. We stay determined to protect religious freedom. We sincerely hope that, by speaking out, international friends will better understand the case and remind the Taiwan government to hold the illegal officials accountable. The unlawful government officials should admit their mistakes, start damaging Taiwan's democracy, and return the confiscated land of Taijimen. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Jeff Chen. There are a lot of Chen, in Taiwan. And the worldwide community of Taijimen DC will read a statement.
Good morning. I'm a Taijimen Dizi. We have a joint statement of worldwide Taijimen Dizi. Taijimen is an ancient empire of Qigong, martial arts, and self-cultivation. Its leader, Dr. Hong Daozi, established the Taijimen Qigong Academy in Taiwan in 1966. Now it has 15 academies around the world. Taijimen Dizi help themselves and others through practicing Qigong, strengthening their bodies, cultivating their hearts and moral character. Taijimen Dizi also promote the culture of peace with love and conscience to realize world peace. The Taijimen case arose as a result of Taiwan's draconian legacy. The government misused its power to suppress people's freedom of religion and belief through its judicial and tax systems. In the 55 years since the establishment of Taijimen, there has never been any tax problem. Prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren indicted Taijimen on the basis of fabricated evidence and false witnesses 25 years ago, and the National Taxation Bureau did not check the facts, solely relying on the prosecutor's untrue indictment to issue unjustified tax bills to Taijimen. The tax bills, as a byproduct of prosecution, have continued to haunt Taijimen to this day. In 2007, the Supreme Court of Taiwan found Taijimen not guilty of tax evasion or any other charges. All defendants that had been detained received compensation for wrongful imprisonment. However, the Taiwanese government's persecution of Taijimen has not yet ceased. On August 21st, 2020, Taijimen's sacred land was illegally and forcibly auctioned and nationalized. The illegal auction seriously undermines our mission to help the world. The National Taxation Bureau has continued to discriminate against Taijimen and its members, denying them their rights to freedom or belief, which is in serious violation of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is also in breach of the ICCPR and ICESCR, which guarantee people's right to equity, non-discrimination, a fair trial, and cultural rights. The Taiwanese government has failed to fulfill its obligation to provide effective remedies to the people. The traditional culture that Taijimen is dedicated to preserving and promoting has been seriously harmed by the human rights violation and denial of justice by the handful of lawless government officials. Such acts of cultural destruction and deprivation of people's right to spiritual development has threatened social cohesion and stability. And we are concerned that they could fuel radicalism and violent extremism. Taiwanese and international experts and scholars have voiced their support for Taijimen, demonstrating that the harm inflicted by this case is not restricted to Taiwan, and it has global implications. For more than a quarter century, the Taijimen culture, the human rights of Taijimen's leaders and members, and their freedom of thought and belief have been severely harmed, and over 10,000 families have been persecuted. It is one of the longest-running cases in Taiwan's history, involving the largest number of victims and seriously infringing on the freedom of religion or belief of worldwide Taijimen members. With one voice, we hereby denounce the perpetrators. Those who enforce public authority should not be allowed to violate the law of evidence and due process. They should not disregard integrity for personal gain, commit human rights violation, or infringe on people's religious freedom. We demand that the Taiwanese government implement transitional justice and return Taijimen's sacred land immediately. We shall not give up until justice and righteousness are restored, so that freedom and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I understand we will do something original and light up a sign, and one of our dizzy friend will explain how this will work exactly.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Massimo. Well, we've heard many about the Taijimen case. It is unfortunate, and we look forward to an earlier day for it to be resolved. But at the same time, we are grateful that along this journey, we met many great heroes like Dr. Massimo, Mr. Willie Forte, who's online, and many of our media friends and representatives from Congress also joining us, and obviously all of you here for your support. So we like to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Massimo and our representatives on stage, and to invite Ms. Yingfen, Mr. Andy, and also Mr. Jason to join us onto the stage as we stand up, reach out for the truth, and light up the truth together. So please join us, Mr. Andy, Mr. Jason. All right, so please retract your hands for now, and on the count of 3, we will do it unitedly. On my count of 3, please reach out your hand as symbol for all of our unity, all of our strength and courage to reach for the truth and unveil the truth to the world for the protection of human rights, not only for Taijimen, but all people around the world. Please join me to light the truth. 1, 2, 3. Please reach out your hand. And we also do have the light turned on for a few more photos. Thank you very much, Dr. Massimo, Mr. Willie Forte, all of our friends, and the Taijimen Dizi for your persistence. And I know we have some friends online and some friends here. If we have any questions, we'd like to open up this panel, and we'd love to answer and further our discussion if there are any questions at all.
Well, we can always be interrupted by questions, and you are welcome to, but let me wrap up this event. We asked you and those following us by Zoom or YouTube to be here today for a very important human rights case. It's now several years I have spoken in various fora, including international human rights events and academic conferences about the Taijimen case. And I'm always afraid that some misunderstanding may happen, because I fully understand it will be a logical reaction to say that's a very complicated Taiwanese tax law, so let's take it to Taiwanese lawyers and they should solve it. But that's a total misunderstanding. It is not, and it never was, a pure tax case. As we said, it's on 2 accounts a human rights case. First, it's a human rights case because the first human right is freedom of religion or belief. And this case started in 96 when there was a massive denial of freedom of religion or belief in the post-authoritarian Taiwanese context. Whatever happened in subsequent years derives from this fundamental violation of freedom of religion and belief, and continues to be, to this very day, a violation of freedom of religion or belief. But that's not all. As Willy Fautré said, it is also a violation of human rights because it's a case of administrative corruption. As the United Nations have recognized, corruption is a violation of human rights because it prevents citizens from enjoying their human rights. And so it's a serious problem of corruption. Even the US State Department, in their yearly human rights report, they praise Taiwan in many accounts, and rightly so, but they say Taiwan has a problem of bureaucratic corruption it should solve. And the Taijimen case is a case where human rights of the Taijimen community were violated through corruption. Now, I'm an academic, and it may seem that's an academic question. Is it a tax case? Is it a human rights case? But it's not an academic question, it's a very practical question. Because if it was a pure tax case, that's something to be solved by Taiwanese lawyers. Why bother to come to Washington, D.C. and discuss this case? Well, the answer is precisely because it's not primarily, and certainly it's not exclusively a tax case. It's a case of human rights. And in cases of human rights, it is established, recognized principle that it is the right and the duty of the international community to protect human rights. So because it's a case of human rights, it's a case, it's a right, and it's needed that the international community takes an interest, as it is doing, and takes a stand in the violation of the Taijimen human rights in Taiwan. Let me conclude with a personal remarks. I'm Italian, and in Italy we have this expression of a dialogue of deaf people. Two deaf people try to talk to each other, but they cannot have a dialogue. So in this case, we have on the one hand, the Taijimen Dizi. Many Taiwanese scholars from leading universities, they are not dizzy, but they have written about this case. And growingly, dozens of international scholars and human rights activists who have participated in conferences and seminars and webinars about the Taijimen case, and they all say, look, it's a question of freedom of religion or belief, and it's a question of human rights. And on the other hand, we have the Taiwanese authorities, which said, sorry, but for the year 92, the statute of limitation has expired, so there is nothing we can do. But this is false because it's an internationally recognized principle that when gross violations of human rights are acknowledged, the situation should always be rectified. And if there is no administrative remedy, there is always a political remedy. So it seems that it's difficult to explain this to Taiwanese authorities, which are stuck to this formal idea of an expired statute of limitation. So my personal impression is to achieve a political solution which will be in the best interest of Taiwan. This protests are not good for the international image of Taiwan. To achieve a peaceful political solution, the only way is that Taiwan hears from his friends, and primarily his friends are United States. So Taiwan needs to hear from United States that we live in an historical moment when Taiwan needs a maximum of support from his international friends. But a precondition for this support to be effective is for Taiwan to put its own house in order and get rid of these ghosts of its authoritarian past, settle the scores of the authoritarian past, and solve the cases coming from the authoritarian past. And today, the biggest score to be settled, the one generating the most massive domestic and international protest, is the Taijimen case. So I come back to where I started from. It is not because we are against Taiwan, it's the contrary. It's because we are friends of Taiwan and we want to protect Taiwan in a moment of need that we ask Taiwan, please get rid of this problem, which is damaging you in a crucial historical moment for you. Get rid of this problem, get rid of your bad past, walk in the path of democracy, and solve the Taijimen case. Thank you.
And so once again, if there are any questions, if not, we will be concluding today's conference, but we did want to. Oh, so there is a question from YouTube, maybe Dr. Massimo. If there are U.S. government representatives present, could we hear his or her view on if or how this case influences USA relationships with Taiwan with the backdrop of the current Chinese-USA relationships? This is a question from Hans Newt online. Headed for the U.S. government representatives.
Yeah, I don't believe U.S. government representatives will make your position known through a press conference not organized by them. That's not how diplomatic relations work. I can say it as a husband of a diplomat. So, but we know several U.S. institutions and departments are taking an active interest in the Taijimen case, and as somebody who's been following the Taijimen case, I'm personally very grateful to the American departments and institutions which are taking an interest and following the Taijimen case, and I'm sure their efforts and the efforts of a few congressmen and congresswomen who are also taking an interest in the Taijimen case will be very important. And as the question said, all this, of course, nothing happens in a vacuum. All this is happening in a certain geopolitical situation involving the cross-strait relationship of Taiwan and China. And I'm sure the United States may play a crucial role in explaining that any domestic criticism about their own human rights is not playing in favor of Taiwan in many respects, and surely also in respects of healthy cross-strait relationships in a moment where problems and difficulties exist.
Thank you, Professor. Any more questions from online community? All right. If not, Dr. Massimo, it's once again, we are very grateful and encouraged by all of us coming together and your support, Mr. Willie Fultre being online. And also, of course, we see Amanda and Kim joining us, and also Michael being with us for this conference. And would we be able to document today and invite all of the Taijimen Dizi, for those seated already, to stay seated, and all of you to join us for a final picture, also capturing the online participants for coming together and revealing the truth with us. So we can have several rows. Thank you everyone for joining us in this, for the camera, for the videos, to document this day as we come together to reveal the truth, fighting for human rights, for justice. So everyone join me on the count of 3. Let's say, for human rights. 1, 2, 3. For human rights. Second one, with their hand up to show our determination for justice. 1, 2, 3. For justice. Thank you, everyone. One more time? Okay. So together, right? All right, let's put our hands down. We'll do for human rights, for justice. When you say for justice, put your hand up, okay? You ready for us? Okay, on the count of 3, for human rights, for justice. When you say for justice, that's when we can put our hands up. 1, 2, 3. For human rights, for justice. One more time. All right, we can do it. For justice, that's when we put it up. 1, 2, 3. For human rights, for justice. Thank you all. Thank you for this wonderful conference. Let's continue to work together for all justice around the world.